Um, and here we are. We are live. It will probably take a little bit of time for people to join from the waiting room, but while they do, I think we can go ahead and get started. My name is Rick Barcelos. As always, I am your host for the Micro Lesson webinar series. This is the first one that we're going to be doing here in 2026, so I'm really excited, and I'm even more excited to be joined by Dolan, who is an absolute master of branding. Dolan, I'm really excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us to present the lesson. Everybody's here to hear from you, not me. And so I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Rick. Yes, as Rick mentioned, I'm Dolan. And this is Delusions of Brand-Jure. We're going to talk about how to utilize branding, visual branding to deliver ROI, actual business results. And along the way, we're going to talk about some tips and tricks to get the most out of whatever budget you do have to dedicate to your brand. So yeah, as Rick mentioned, my name's Dolan. I own and operate Treeswing Studio, which is a small branding agency in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Go Blue. We do a lot of things. We do also do illustration, websites, different things like that. But primarily what we do is we help tell brand stories for businesses and nonprofits. That's what we're passionate about, and that's what we're best at. So again, I'm very passionate about branding, but not everyone is. Who even cares? Aren't we just making things look pretty? Why would we do that? Why would we invest money in it? I'll tell you who cares. McKinsey Global. Have you ever heard of them? They have research that says that the highest growth companies invest 5 times more in their intangible assets than their low growth competitors. Those intangible assets, they include branding. One thing that's amazing about your brand, both visual and brand voice and all those things that make up a brand, is that it can't be copied and replicated by competitors the way a product or service might be. It takes time and it takes repetition and all those things and to build that brand loyalty, and that's yours. It can't be taken. One reason that maybe that extra investment is worth it for those high growth companies is because brand loyalty can increase the lifetime value of a customer by as much as 40%. Because they keep coming back because they have an emotional connection to you. And then from a cost standpoint, we're talking about ROI today. That investment typically pays off in not that long. So there's 6 to 18 months, for big companies, for small companies, that investment can pay off no matter what that cost is. If you're a big company, you're investing $250,000 in a rebrand, that's going to pay off. If you're a little company and only have a quarter of one single dollar, that can pay off too. Investment doesn't have to mean a 6-figure rebrand. That's a quote from me because I said it right now. And if you say it, it's a quote. So there you go. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about what are the small things you can do. You don't have much budget. Maybe you don't have any budget. Maybe your marketing team is just you and you're wearing all the hats, including design. What are some small things you can do to really push your brand as far as you can and get that customer loyalty and stuff? So let's talk about itty bitty baby steps. What are the little tiny things you can do that don't take much investment that you can do? Let's talk about easy peasy thing number 1. Embrace the boredom. It's tough, when you're putting stuff together, it is so hard. You're looking at the same colors, the same fonts all the time, and you can get sick of them. Your leadership might get sick of them and say, can we do something new? The thing is, you're interacting with your brand every day. Consumers are only interacting with your brand once in a while, and you need that repetition, to build that loyalty. If you have a brand guide already, follow it. It can be that simple. If you want to make things dead simple for yourself, focus on using one font and one color. and just keep repeating those two things, not just one color, but focus on one key color. Think about T-Mobile and their magenta and how they just hammer that home in order to build that recognition. And yes, don't mix it up just because you feel like it, just because you're bored. That's not how repetition is. Branding is just repetition. There's a quote from Michael Beirut, who's a famous designer at Pentagram, and he said 50% of branding is just repeating the same font over and over again. So embrace that. Easy peasy thing number 2, create systems and templates for yourself and your team. This is going to increase that consistency in your brand, which is awesome. And it's also going to save you time, to designing things. If all you have to do is change out the text, change out the imagery. This is a really good thing. If you do have a limited budget for a designer or something like that, hire a designer to create these, and then you'll get more bang for your buck because you can keep using those down the road. All right, easy peasy thing number 3. It's crap. It's crap, people. What does crap stand for, and why is it in the middle of this presentation? Well, Robin Williams, unfortunately not that Robin Williams, that would be amazing, but Robin Williams is a designer, and she wrote the Non-Designer's Design Book, and there's a lot of really good information in here that kind of sets the baseline of specific things to look for. A lot of it's kind of inherent, people feel it, but it gives contextualization to that. So the big thing she hammers home in this: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. It's easy to remember because it's crap. And you can focus on those things when you're designing your assets, or if you're, looking for evaluating designs that have been done for you. What do those things mean? Contrast. Obviously we're talking about light on dark. What's great is this not only increases visual appeal, but it also hits on the accessibility standards. For people with low vision, that contrast is extra important. Alignment, to keep things simple for yourself, pick either left aligned, center aligned, and keep everything in the layout that way. And that will, it's much easier for the human eye to follow than having to jump all around. Repetition, as we just covered, repetition is branding. Keep repeating your logo, repeating your colors, repeating your typeface again and again and again to build that recognition. And lastly, proximity. You want to group like things together in a layout. A good example of this is a restaurant menu. All the parts of the meal are grouped together. And then, also grouped together spatially are the, each item with the things in the item or the prices and things like that. Group things that belong together spatially together, and that's going to help the viewer to understand that layout. Okay. Let's say you do have a little budget for a designer or an agency, and you want to make that relationship the best as possible. How can you get them to fall in love with you? Obviously, this is from a work standpoint, not romantically. That's an HR conversation, not a webinar. So, but how can we get this relationship to be the best possible? Number 1, give them direct, specific, and consistent feedback. This is good advice for us all. As Kim Scott in Radical Candor observed, it's the best way to achieve great results. But for designers, don't just approve, and then suddenly have issues with something, 2 months in. That's going to really make the designer not sure what they're supposed to be doing. One way you can give that small specific feedback is look for things like what we just talked about. You can use, there's a tool called WebAIM Contrast Accessibility Checker. You can plug in the hex codes into that and see if they are using appropriate contrast. And if they're not, you can call that out and say, I noticed that this headline isn't correctly contrasting. Make sure the work they're making is aligning to brand guidelines. If they're using unapproved color combinations or something like that, you can call that out and say, hey, I know it's not approved for these colors to go together. And then, of course, just focus on the concept of contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. If you see some errors there's reasons to break these rules, and maybe they have a good one. But if you see some errors there, that might be a good thing to ask for changes on. Next thing you can do to woo your designer, if you will, have your brand assets, if you have them, organized and accessible in a nice little shareable folder. There is no greater feeling in the world than starting with a new client and they have everything in one folder and it's just easy to get. Oh, it's incredible. And especially if you're paying your designer hourly, you're going to save money there too, because they don't have to organize it. They don't have to search around to find things. Um, so what should be in that folder? Your brand guide, if you have one, font files. If they're called out in your brand guide, download those, even if they're really accessible on Google Fonts or whatever. Download those, so no matter what, that designer has the ability to load those fonts onto their computer. Any images and photography, especially if you're B2C or e-commerce brand, if you have a lot of images and they're well organized, either by date or like product or something like that, that can be so helpful and such a time saver. And then lastly, illustrations or other graphic elements that are part of your brand, for sure have those in there too. If you have the native files, even better, because then that illustration can be edited for different formats and things like that. So if all that's right in a nice spot and immediately shared with the designer, they're going to be so happy. Lastly, indicate and reinforce that you trust them to do their job. Designers, we're such softies. We need that love. We need that trust. I would say this advice especially goes if you have a younger, less seasoned designer. Maybe you're looking to save a little money. Those type of folks are maybe not quite as good at taking feedback and turning it into a success. So, this is kind of the inverse of what we talked about with radical candor at the beginning. Unspecific feedback. Can you make it pop? It's an in-joke in the design community, but make it pop is terrible piece of feedback. What does that mean? Make it pop? I don't know. And that can be really frustrating for a designer when they have feedback that feels hard to execute on. If you ask for brand violations, again, kind of inverse to the previous, what is good to ask your designer for. If you're asking for brand violations, hey, can you use this typeface that's not in our brand? Hey, can you use an unapproved color combination? That's going to be frustrating. That positive feedback is just as important as the negative. And so, giving specific feedback is great. Noticing when they're doing things correctly, hey, I love that how you aligned to our brand guidelines here. Hey, I love how, you kept the contrast really nice there, or, divided the sections up. Different things that you notice that they hit on your brand. That positive feedback is good because, one, it inspires confidence. And two, now we know, I'm going to repeat that because I know the client likes that. All right. So not only do you have the budget to hire a designer or an agency, you have secured a giant stack of cash in your marketing budget to do the rebrand that everybody's been talking about for years because your logo stinks and everybody hates it, and now it's time to rebrand. How do we make this project a success? How do we deliver that ROI on the cost that it's going to be? Here's a few ways that you could do that. Number one, hire the right agency partner. How can you figure out if they're going to do well? Here's some things to look for. Do they specialize in branding, or is it at least one of their core offerings? All of this advice kind of falls under the headline of branding and design and visuals are a very subjective thing. And so all this process that we do, all that your agency should be doing, worrying about technical details, process before and after design, using strategy integrated with visuals. All that is, the goal is to make things more objective so that it's easier to make those decisions in a way that's going to communicate correctly, and also easier to get that investment long-term from your C-suite and beyond, and keep that investment years down the road. What should you be getting besides just a logo? You might set out to think we just need to redo our logo. Well, the brand's a lot more than just a logo. here's the other things you should be getting. You should be getting a brand guide that details how to use the brand well. A lot of logo files. You might think I just need one logo file. You should be getting vector and raster. That means SVG or EPS and PNG for vector for scalability, raster for ease of use and sharing. You should be getting those for all situations. So that means, your whole full color logo, but also a single color logo, maybe definitely inverse white on black type logo that's properly inverted. Maybe like an iconic logo for social media avatars and things like that. All those things. It's going to be quite a few logo files in the end, actually, most likely. You should be getting probably about 2 typefaces, one for body, one for headline. Maybe just one, like we talked about before. Maybe a few more, depending on what kind of positioning your brand has. You should be getting a color palette, and that color palette should be detailed out as far as how it should be used in the world. That means hex codes, RGB, CMYK, and Pantone matching for lots of different uses, for use on screen, for use in print, for use in screen printing or something like that. You're going to need all those in the end to ensure that consistency. And lastly, you probably need some supporting graphic elements. That maybe is, specific illustrations or just like an illustration style, or maybe some like background patterns and textures to use in layouts, things like that, that will complement your brand and support your brand throughout other layouts through everywhere. The number one indicator of a success of a rebrand before it starts is investment from key stakeholders. Start talking to your leadership, start talking to your C-suite, and have them understand, make sure they are fully on board and they understand the goals of the rebrand and everything, because that, again, is the number one indicator of success. I would make sure you have that investment before starting. And then I would also keep them involved throughout the process so they understand the work that went into creating this logo and creating this brand. So it doesn't just show up on their desk and they're like, I hate this logo. That seems crazy, but I have a cautionary tale for you. Look at, there we are. Look at this sweet young boy who was designing a logo for a nonprofit. And he was so simple and young, and he didn't know what he was doing. So, a couple months later, 40 hours of work in, I didn't realize that the team hadn't even talked about the board that they were doing this, and all that work disappeared in one meeting. And so it's a really good example of why you need to have that investment. Yeah. Okay, ROI. I know we're all here for it. This is why we're here. We put it in the name of the webinar. Who doesn't love a good business acronym? ROI. How can you find the ROI rebrand? It feels hard to hold on to and hard to point to. First thing, remember, branding is an investment, not a cost. How can you find that return? It could be as simple as, what was your revenue 6 months leading up to the rebrand? What was your revenue for the 6 months after the rebrand? And do that subtraction and then divide it by what you spent on the brand. And that'll give you a rough idea. Unfortunately, this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's a lot else going on at your company. There's economic factors. There's all this other stuff going on. So that's a little foggier. But it gives you a rough number. But to get a more accurate, you need to understand and measure the problem that you're solving. This might mean different things for different projects. Maybe it's that your ideal customers you don't have enough brand recognition amongst them. Maybe it's that your target audience, views you a little bit incorrectly. They think, that's more of a cheaper option, as opposed to you're trying to sell a high-end version, at a high-end price point. That can be that's what you need to be doing with Rebrand. You need to have a problem and you need to be solving it. So you need to measure that before and after. Whether that's market research, survey, something like that. Measure, have a metric to start with, and then after your rebrand, see how that's improved. Hopefully. Okay. Now, this is a growth webinar. We deliver, tangible takeaways, ready to go. What can you do right this second? As soon as I stop talking, can you imagine? It's going to be so great when I stop talking. I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing my voice. So, what can you do once that happens? Okay. Do these things. Embrace the boredom. It's okay if all your deliverables look the same. That's kind of the point. Embrace the principles of CRAP: contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity. If you're working with a designer, give them small, frequent, and consistent feedback. And then if you are in the position where you're ready to do some big rebrand, embark on that journey. First, consider the problem, and then start working on your key stakeholders to get that investment. So that it can be an amazing success, and everybody's going to be clapping in the office and patting you on the back and high-fiving and stuff, that kind of thing, once you deliver the new logo. Some resources, as I mentioned, the Non-Designer's Design Book, written by the non-acting Robin Williams. You can read Conquer Your Rebrand. It's a really great book. It's written by Bill Kenny from Focus Lab. It's essentially a lot of the same type of content that we've got here, but just obviously much more detailed. It's a real look inside the process of how they do things. And it's written to client facing. So really great book, a lot of great information in there. And then lastly, you can use tools like the WebAIM contrast checker to get those technical details right when you're discussing with your designer, or if you don't have a designer. So those are that's it. That's what you can do and how you can deliver some ROI with your brand. Thank you guys for coming. If you'd like to find me in the internet world, you can see our Instagram is treeswing.studio. Our website's treeswing.studio. And you can email us at hello@treeswing.studio.
Hell yes, that was incredible, Dolan. Thank you so much for putting this together. I think that there's so much misconception around branding and how to actually look at it, right? And so I think that this is such an important conversation. We do have some questions in the chat, and also some that I got from the forums to sign up from the lesson that I think it's cool to bring up. We still have a couple minutes. So let's start with the ones that are in the chat, if you will. Daniel is asking, what about copyright and trademarking your logo?
Yes, that definitely is the question, should you do that? If the question is, should you do that? Yeah, it's probably worth doing that after it gets designed. Definitely, if part of your rebrand is renaming your company, then definitely spend some time in the U.S. Trademark Office website, making sure that you're getting something unique and ownable and legally unique and ownable, as well as from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah, I'll add to this because I've personally, before joining Growth, I used to had my own startup, and we had some issues because of waiting too long and not thinking about trademarking and copywriting some of our stuff, and that actually pushed us to have to do a full rebrand. So it's important. It's something to think about, right? Especially if you've got like a logo and a brand that you're proud of and you love, and you're starting to build some respect and image behind it all. I think that it's really important.
Well, and that's another, when we were talking about how to vet an agency partner, and we were talking about technical details. Do they understand the technical details? That's a really good technical detail to make sure that they're prepared to look out for that.
Definitely. And Daniel just added on another piece to his question, which I think brings up also an interesting question in general when we're talking about branding, because he said, he's asking, just because AI generated content cannot be copyrighted. And I think that that's super interesting when we're talking about the perspective of branding and new AI tools and AI generated stuff. Like, what in general, like, what's your take on that, Dolan?
Yeah, I mean, the use of AI and creating logos, you know, it is a very affordable option. Obviously, if you're looking for a logo for your company or something like that, but what you're going to lose by doing it that way, in addition to not being able to trademark it, is that strategy. Again, a logo is not something that just looks good. There's strategy and communication behind it, and as much as hiring someone, agency or a designer, the goal is to have them understand technically and artistically how to make a good logo. They also should understand how to walk you through that strategy and give you the confidence that you're going to be able to stick with this rebrand for a long time because you set the groundwork correctly. And just plugging something into Chat GPT or whatever is not going to give you that same amount of confidence.
That makes so much sense. Like, and I mean, still on that topic, I think it's probably something a lot of people are curious. So, where do you see, because, everybody's thinking about AI and AI tools and how they can use that for every single part of their day, from branding to how can I have ChatGPT make my coffee for me in the morning?
Yeah.
Like, where do you see AI used right, or the best place for it around the branding conversation?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about those, in our easy peasy things, we talked about building templates and things like that. The execution across those is a really good spot. There's tools out there that can execute with pretty decent consistency. Some especially like banner ads or web advertisements or anything like that. That's not quite as heavy a lift. That's a really good spot to use it. You definitely still need to have a watchful eye, looking for those design principles and other things, making sure your stuff is turning out great. But that's a good spot. I think that it's pretty useful.
That makes sense. And I mean, there's a lot of tools that go, like, you have the stage of building your logo, building your brand, and then there's probably a lot of tools out there, things like Gamma, for an example, for presentations, as an example, that take what you have, the strategy, the fully laid out thing, and then just use that to kind of save you a little bit of time. Maybe that's interesting too,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. I think, yeah, just like we talked about, in a non AI context, I think, making sure you're laying that groundwork and doing things strategically and technically well. Those are the two things I think you miss out on when you use AI, at least currently, is that strategy and that technical execution.
Definitely. And we still have time for more questions. If you guys want to drop in the chat, we did have a question that was sent in by somebody who did register, but I don't believe they were able to be here today. And they have asked, from a perspective of somebody who is looking to hire a person for their team to be in charge of branding and brand development,
Mhm.
maybe of a big rebrand or something like that, what should they be looking for when they're going through interview processes to find the right person for that? Because I think that there's a big spectrum of people that are into the branding
For
role,
sure.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from a design standpoint, if they're looking to hire a designer for that execution, it's really the same things we talked about earlier when we were talking about how to vet an agency. You're going to want to make sure that they understand the presence of strategy in brand design and how to connect that back. You're going to want to make sure they understand the technical details of design. I mean, uh, are they, contrast accessibility is an easy one to look for. Making sure there's so many graphic design technical things that I think sometimes are lost on folks who aren't designers, but like making sure you have a body copy typeface that has the right X height and has open counters and things like that for skimmability. And I mean, the biggest thing is making sure they are executing for communication and not just for visual fun, for lack of a better word.
Right. So going a little beyond, just like, I think I've seen pretty often where in the hiring process they're focused on looking at a portfolio, for an example,
Yeah.
of visuals. But I think like what you're getting at is like what's behind that too, right? So like what's their
Yeah,
understanding of being able to apply those things to the actual like complete story and the customer journey and the brand.
for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. That makes sense. Well, I think we're just about at time. We try to be pretty timely with these, but just so everybody's aware, you will all get the recording sent to you on Monday. So look out for that. I will also include Dolan's presentation and additional assets that he has to share with us in that email. Before we close out, Dolan, is there anything else that you want to say to the people watching?
Um, no.
You said it all, man. You said it beautifully, too. Mic drop moment. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, Dolan, I really appreciate you coming. Everybody that has been able to come be here with us live, I appreciate you showing up as well. And for everybody that's watching on the recording end, on YouTube, or any of our other platforms, thank you as well. This was an incredible time, Dolan. I really appreciate you. Thank you, everybody, for coming once again.
Thank
And I'll
you.
see you guys on the next micro lesson. See you.